Monetary theory, modern monetary theory is not a prescription. It is not a rule. It's not a law. It's not something to be done. It's not something to enact. It's not something that is a new policy or program or a new currency system. It's not anything new. It literally is. It is a description of what is today. Now, the problem. Many people try to make MMT say things that it does not say. Modern monetary theory describes federal financing. It describes currency at all times. And as of now, right this minute, MMT describes a sovereign fiat currency that is not tied to gold. It's not tied to gasoline, petro. It's not tied to anything but the full faith and credit of the United States.
It so happens with many people when they get introduced to MMT, if they're thoughtful people, if they really reflect on it, you know, a light goes off in their head, a light bulb goes off in their head, as I'm sure it did with you, Steve. And you say, wait a minute, that is how it works, right? The government is a maker of dollars. Everybody else is a taker of dollars. It's not, you know, there's only one place that I could come from, but something that controls our society, something that controls our politics, something that controls our...
An economy has to provide for all. And it has to provide some very basic things, right? We've got this market system that has produced wealth unlike anything else we have seen in the history of the world. But the system doesn't distribute its wealth, its riches in an even way. And it is a failure. It's just not just an economic failure, it's a moral failure.
So for example, you have food pantries, and you have organizations that deal with domestic violence and with environmental pollution, as with after-school programs for youth, and all kinds of organizations in every single town in the U.S. that have a strong track record of delivering services to the local community. When you ask them, if you have an opportunity to apply for a grant from the federal government for financing X number of dollars, how many people will you be able to hire to deliver the services that your community needs? So the job guarantee proposal is to have those organizations apply for federal grants and receive the federal grants to hire people in the same community that they're serving, unemployed people from the same community, to deliver services to their own community. And who's best to decide what are the needs of a particular community than organizations that are already established and connected in that same community? So we're not...
The public purpose is that, to design public policies that are universal, that are guaranteed, that provide a very minimum basic decent standard of living, include universal education, universal healthcare, the right to a shelter has to be guaranteed, the right to food, decent food, and the right to a decent, well-paying job. So
the people who argue for, argue that the job guarantee is somehow socialism or somehow inconsistent with the principles of freedom and and all that stuff it's just people who don't know what we're talking about. They haven't read the stuff. They haven't listened to a full presentation of what the job guarantee is about. And that's unfortunate. I mean, if we as concerned citizens, regardless of political affiliation, are concerned about unemployment, are concerned about poverty, are concerned about all the negative consequences of unemployment, we should at least consider some of the alternative options, because whatever we've been doing, it hasn't been working.
I think that's a problem with our elected representatives. I have met with progressive Democrat politicians over the past 25 years, and when we start talking about budget deficits, they completely understand that a sovereign government is not like a household. They understand that there's no necessity to balance the budget over the course of a year or ever. But they say, look, I can't say that in public.
My education as an economist was really as in sort of the neoclassical vein, which is what is taught in schools. Unfortunately, it's taught at the top schools. I went to Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. I did a master's at UCLA, and it's taught this brand of economics, which fundamentally kind of misunderstands our monetary system. It's really kind of still taught as if we are in a gold standard or a fixed exchange rate.
We're borrowing about 40 cents on every dollar that Washington spends today, half of that from other countries like China.
To take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
A balanced government budget and a current account deficit of 5%, by definition, by accounting identity, the private sector, taken as a whole, is going to be running a deficit of 5% of GDP, equal to that current account deficit. Private sector deficits are very rare and extremely dangerous. We had a private sector deficit essentially from 1996 until 2006. And that was one of the fundamental causes of the global financial crisis. We crashed when the private sector no longer could service their debt and people started defaulting on excessive debt.
That we are going to have to pay back $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. That's irresponsible. It's unpatriotic.
First, America cannot continue to spend more money than it takes in, and certainly not at the pace that it's spending it now.
The government that has its own money is not like a household. It's not like a firm. So whenever a politician tells you that if I ran my household budget the way Uncle Sam runs his, I would go bankrupt, and therefore Uncle Sam can't do this either. It's the second part of that statement that is completely wrong. Yes, you would go bankrupt if you ran your budget the way Uncle Sam does, which is to run deficits almost all the time since the founding of the nation. But Uncle Sam cannot go bankrupt. So that is the big difference. Once you understand that, then you understand that, of course, tax revenue is not important for giving Uncle Sam what he needs to spend, because he's got it.
A bunch of research here recently regarding positive money. Can you break this down for us?
We agree that the banks are completely run away. There's just so much excess, so much fraudulent behavior, too big to fail. They engaged in risky and fraudulent practices before the crisis. The Fed and Treasury bailed them out, patted them on their little behinds and said, go back to doing what you've been doing because you've been doing such a great job. This has to be stopped. So they're absolutely right about that. We want to constrain the banks too. They think that they can constrain them by making them narrow banks. Some of the proponents of positive money, of what's called narrow banking or full reserve banking or 100% money banking, they want to prohibit the banks from just creating money out of thin air. Now, remember what I said before. Hyman Minsky said anyone can create money. All you have to do is write, I owe you $5. How are you going to prevent that? You can't prevent people or institutions from creating money.